You ever flip through your Bible and notice that blank page between the Old and New Testaments? It kind of feels like a gap. People often call it the 400 silent years, which makes it sound like God went quiet and nothing important happened. Well, I'm here to tell you that could not be further from the truth. This period was anything but silent. It was an absolutely explosive era of change that completely reshaped the world and set the stage for everything, and I mean everything, we read in the Gospels. So let's pull back the curtain on what really happened in the silence.
So what really went down during this time? How do we get from the world of Malachi under the Persian Empire to the Roman-occupied world that Jesus was born into? This isn't just some boring historical footnote. Understanding this period is literally the key to unlocking why the New Testament world looks, sounds, and feels the way it does. It's the context for the whole story.
All right, so the first major catalyst for change was this cultural earthquake that came roaring in from the West. And it all started with one man and one very, very big idea.
Okay, to kind of get our bearings, let's just look at this timeline. The Old Testament closes out with Judea under the control of the Persian Empire. Pretty stable. Then, bam, 332 BC, Alexander the Great just sweeps through and everything changes. After that, there's this brief, hard-won window of Jewish independence, only to have the Roman legions show up. This constant changing of the guard created non-stop turmoil and transformation. Now, Alexander didn't just conquer with swords, he conquered with culture. This whole process was called Hellenization, and you can think of it like a mandatory software update for the entire known world. Suddenly, Greek language, Greek philosophy, Greek gyms, Greek architecture, it was absolutely everywhere. It created this common cultural language that stretched across the whole empire.
And this has a massive impact on the Bible itself. The New Testament wasn't written in the traditional Hebrew of the Old Testament. Nope, it was written in Koine Greek, the common, everyday, street-level language of the empire. This was a total game changer. It meant the story of Jesus wasn't going to be confined to just one ethnic group. It was instantly accessible to the entire Greek-speaking world.
But Hellenization also created a new problem. You had generations of Jews now living outside Judea who were losing their Hebrew. They were speaking Greek as their first language. So what was the solution? Well, it was one of the most important translation projects in all of human history, the Septuagint. Tradition says 70 scholars got together and translated the entire Hebrew scriptures into Greek, making them accessible once again.
And just how influential was this thing? Get this, when you see Jesus or Paul quoting the Old Testament in the Gospels, more often than not, they are quoting directly from this Greek translation. The Septuagint basically became the Bible for that first generation of Christians. It was the version they knew. But this cultural pressure cooker also led to some really intense conflict. As Greek influence got stronger and stronger, a crisis of Jewish identity just erupted. And this led to revolt, to persecution, and to these deep religious divisions that would end up defining the very world Jesus was born into.
The breaking point came with this Syrian Greek ruler named Antiochus IV. This guy was brutal. He launched a massive persecution, banning Jewish practices like circumcision and observing the Sabbath. But his final, ultimate insult was marching into the Holy of Holies in the Jerusalem temple and sacrificing a pig to Zeus on the altar. I mean, you can't even imagine a more profound spiritual trauma. Now, this is so crucial. Years later, when Jesus is on the Mount of Olives and he warns his disciples about a future abomination of desolation, he isn't just using some vague, mystical term. He's tapping into the memory of this specific, horrific event that was seared into the collective psyche of every single Jew who was listening to him. They knew exactly what he was talking about. And it's out of this chaos that these new groups started to emerge. You read the Old Testament, you won't find any Pharisees or Sadducees. These famous sects from the Gospels were born right here, in this pressure cooker. Each one of them represented a different answer to the big question: how are we supposed to live under foreign occupation? The Pharisees built a fence of tradition to protect their identity. The Sadducees kind of collaborated to keep their power. The Zealots wanted a violent revolution. And the Essenes, well, they just left society altogether and went out to the desert.
Now, after a brief and glorious period of independence that was won by a Jewish revolt, some internal squabbling among the Jewish leaders opened the door for the final and most formidable power to take the stage: Rome.
In 63 BC, the Roman general Pompey marches into Jerusalem. And that was it. Jewish independence was over, for good. Judea was now just another client state of the vast and powerful Roman Empire. This sets the final political backdrop for the entire New Testament. And this Roman takeover sets up a really critical question from the Gospels. I mean, think about the trial of Jesus. If the Sanhedrin, the Jewish high court, had already condemned Jesus to death, why did they have to schlep him over to the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate, to get the job done? Why didn't they just do it themselves?
Well, the answer lies in Roman law. It's actually pretty simple. When Rome took over, they stripped the local authorities of certain powers. And one of the biggest ones was the right to capital punishment, what the Romans called the jus gladii, which literally means the right of the sword. From then on, only a Roman official could legally order an execution.
And this isn't just a historical theory. It's right there in the text. This is exactly what the Gospel of John records. When Pilate tries to hand Jesus back to the leaders and says, "Judge him by your own law," what did they say? They state the stark political reality of their situation. It is not lawful for us to put anyone to death. This tiny detail in the story is a direct echo of this major historical power shift.
And it's not just the politics. Other key institutions from the Gospels also took shape during this period. The synagogue system, which gave Jesus a ready-made platform to teach in every single town, that developed during this time. The Sanhedrin, the high court that would eventually condemn him, formed during this era. And even that magnificent temple where Jesus taught. It was a massive construction project built by Herod the Great, a paranoid puppet king installed by, you guessed it, Rome.
So you see, these 400 years, they were anything but silent. They were a period of intense, chaotic, and crucial preparation. Every single political conquest, every cultural shift, every religious crisis was forging the exact conditions necessary for the events of the New Testament to unfold.
It all converged into what the Apostle Paul would later call the fullness of time. It was like a perfect storm. Just think about it. Culturally, you had a common Greek language to carry the message everywhere. Politically, you had Roman roads and a relative peace, the Pax Romana, that made travel possible. Religiously, you had a synagogue in almost every town providing an open door for teaching. And spiritually, after centuries of being occupied, you had this deep, desperate, all-consuming hunger for a Messiah to finally arrive. The stage was perfectly and completely set.
So those so-called silent years were, in fact, the very years that gave the Gospels their language, their conflicts, their institutions, and their desperate hope. It was a period that ends not with silence at all, but with a proclamation that was about to change the world forever.